So, hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Tracy Stein. As always, I'm really excited to be here with you. Not because today's topic is going to be a light one. It's not. Today, we're going to talk about gaslighting. So, buckle up. But there's good reason for me talking about that. So, again, you know, I'm kind of new agey. I'm going to light my little candle here just to kind of set the tone. You do what you need to do. And don't underestimate these little rituals that we do that help us to center, right? More important than ever, we need to do things that help us feel like we have time and sacred space, not only in our outer world, but in our inner world, even more important. And remember, the inner world is what you take with you everywhere you go. So if doing something like this feels great, wonderful. If it's saying a little prayer or affirmation, terrific. If it's just taking a few deep breaths, you do what works for you. So I can't believe the overwhelming response I got to my most recent podcast episode, Why You Attract So Many Narcissists. Now, of course, it's probably because so many of us do, right? And it's draining, it's exhausting, it's demoralizing, and it can make you question your worth and your sanity and so forth. Now, two things that came up in response to that episode were, one, you know, how do I know whether I should let go of relationships or create distance or just kind of do work on myself? And I'm going to get to that in a bit, because it's important to have things that you can actually do. It's much more empowering that way, right? But gaslighting always comes up when you talk about toxic people, whether the person would be clinically more narcissistic or psychopathic or antisocial. It really doesn't matter. Your job really is not to figure out the other person's psychology or pathology. It's to really take a look at what feels okay to you and manage the stuff that doesn't. So you take good care of you, because you know what? We're the only people who can take care of us. Even if we have the best friends and family and so forth in the world, the boundaries that we set in our relationships and internally are ones that can actually be life-saving and certainly sanity saving. So without further ado, I want to talk a little bit about gaslighting. Now, it's a term that's really in the common vernacular at this point, gaslighting. And I think, you know, probably people have a somewhat good sense of what it is and what it means and maybe even where it comes from. But I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview and then kind of tell you more about, you know, what you can do. So gaslighting. Gaslighting is a term that was popularized, I think, in the late 30s. And then another movie was made subsequent to the original movie. So the title is a movie title. Ingrid Bergman, Charles Boyer, Angela Lansbury. It was her first movie, I believe. But the movie was about a husband who gaslit his wife and really went to great lengths to make her doubt her own sanity, you know, poisoned other people's perceptions of her so that there was really no one she felt she could go to, and, you know, denied her reality on purpose. And if you're interested, you can see the movie, either the earlier one or the 1944 one. It's an interesting movie. But the point is that people who gaslight, a hallmark of gaslighting is lying to someone to the point that they deny their own sanity, they deny their own reality. And if you can feel a lot of emotion coming up right now, that's completely normal, right? Because if you've experienced this, especially from early on, the old stuff is always the hardest stuff to hold, I think. You know, the newer stuff is really just a recapitulation or a reenactment of the old stuff. But once you know what the stuff is and what you can do, it can be very freeing. Even if it brings up a lot of anxiety, please know, again, that that's normal. And we'll talk again about what you can do to center more in a moment. So Gaslighters do this because for a variety of reasons. It gives them a sense of power and control over the person they're gaslighting, right? I mean, what is more, what makes people feel more in control than changing someone else's reality? It's not a good thing, right? And a healthy person wouldn't do this. It's morning, so I'm having a little sip of my Earl Grey here. Don't mind me. But plenty of people do. Now, again, thankfully, most people don't. Gaslighters enjoy the power, they enjoy the control. If somebody's more sadistic, most of you probably heard that word. A sadist is somebody who really enjoys, delights in, feeds off of causing harm or pain or distress to somebody else. And gaslighting 100% does that. Now, I want to just say from the get-go, your job is not to figure out why this person is doing this. You can do that in therapy later on, and that might help you to make sense of a situation that really is senseless otherwise. Your job is not to try and change somebody who is abusing you. And gaslighting is a very serious form of emotional abuse, manipulation, and control. Now, if you read any of my Psychology Today posts, you may have seen the one on the dark tetrad, talking about psychopaths and narcissists and people with antisocial personality disorder, and people who are Machiavellian. And that just means people who really just enjoy manipulating to manipulate, right? So there were a lot of different personality types that are toxic. If you want more information, you can read that post. It's Googleable. But again, your job, first and foremost, is to know and get a sense of, oh my goodness, do I feel like this person who may even profess to love me, especially publicly, is actively trying to manipulate my reality or harm me in some way? And does it feel crazy making? You don't have to be a forensic psychologist. Even I, in a personal relationship, don't have to spend a lot of time deciding why this person is this way. Trust your feelings. And I know how hard that is if you've been going through this, because by design, gaslighting is aimed at making you doubt your own feelings and perceptions. It makes you question your reality. It's designed to make you feel like you are not okay. It's designed to make you feel like you can't tell what's real and what isn't. It's designed to cause you distress. And even though there is a small percentage of people, compared to most people, who delight in causing other people distress, you should know that there is a subset of people who do it just to do it. They love it. And whether they do this because they themselves came from an abusive or gaslighting family, I'm telling you right now, that's not your job to figure it out. People who gaslight, a lot of them are pretty intelligent, because you almost have to be to keep pulling this off so well for years. You don't have to be a genius, but what they can do to make it work even better for them is isolate you from people who would say, holy cow, that is completely off. No, you're right. Trust your feelings. So you may not have as much freedom. If you're a child growing up, maybe you're not getting to do as many after school activities, and maybe the reason given to you is something entirely different. I don't know what that would be, but it could be anything from, we can't afford to put you in these activities, which sometimes is true, to I don't want you associating with, quote, those kind of people, whatever that is, linked to the activity. It could be we'd rather you spend more time at home, or you have too much homework, or whatever. But health and mental and emotional health is something that is multifaceted. And it is as important to have a healthy social life and learn how to interact with people and learn to trust yourself as it is to do pretty much anything else. So somebody who denies that reality and comes up with their good reasons, it's not true. But if they are in charge of your life, again, if you're a child and this has been happening for a long time, you can think that it is true. And you can turn all of that anger or resentment or distrust onto yourself. And that's really, again, that's the aim of gaslighting. It's to harm you to the point that you don't even know which end is up. But you get isolated from people who could help you do a reality check, right? Another hallmark of gaslighting is, people minimizing and devaluing your reactions to things that somebody else would clearly say is not okay, right? So it's denying the reality and it's minimizing your reactions. I'm going to give you an example. Say you have a family that is physically abusive, right? And, this is not an uncommon tactic, actually. You have been pushed or punched or whatever, and now you have bruises, and they're telling you, not just other people, that it's because you tripped or because you're so clumsy or you're so stupid you weren't paying attention, right? So they're denying your reality and they are manipulating the truth to the point where you may not have other people who believe you. Maybe you've been labeled as a complainer or the person who cried wolf or something like that. So changing the narrative, that's a big thing. People who are really skilled gaslighters are often very skilled at covert abuse and manipulation, but public-facing affection. They may brag about you. This is my wonderful partner, friend, sibling, child, employee, because don't think it only happens at home. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But they will give you crumbs to make you feel like you should treat it as a meal. So the crumbs aren't likely genuine, right? Because somebody who really loves you isn't going to keep gaslighting you. They just don't, right? And even though we think certain people are supposed to love us because that's normal and that's what it is, and we all crave that love. It's not loving to tell somebody that you love them or praise them in public and then do all of these horrendous things to them, right? But again, your job isn't to try and fix that person, can't do it. It's hard for somebody who does that to fix that, even if there's a part of them that wants to. And unfortunately, by definition, usually they don't want to fix it. So the person who's going to have to save you is you and other resources that we'll talk about. What else? I wrote a little checklist of things I wanted to make sure I mentioned. But again, if this is true. And again, this can happen at work. This can be the boss that gives you this, enormous task to do. And then you do it and they might thank you in private. And then in public at a meeting takes credit for your work. Maybe it's your boss or a coworker, right? It's a partner who treats you like crap at home and, then, is holding your hand and hugging you in public. I'm not laughing because it's funny. It's more because it generates a lot of stress just to talk about, right? So I'm going to give you an example that's just kind of minimal. So I was at an event, this has to be more than 10 years ago. And it was an event I had to go to because it was, extended family. And this person who is, I know is a gaslighter, and some people know they're a gaslighter, but most people probably don't. Most people have no idea about how this person talks about them behind their back. Most people will, use their desire to make sense of something that's senseless, right? And try and find the good reasons why this person said this, or they just said it poorly, or they didn't mean it, right? And remember, gaslighters, it's probably not the one awful thing that they're doing, because their whole MO is to control and cause distress. So anyway, I'm at this event, and this person that, I know what time it is, but it took a while, right? Because these people are really good at putting on a different public face. And this person spent like 10 minutes really bashing another family member, really going after this person, just in a really devaluing way. And honestly, nothing that they brought up seemed like a horrific crime to me. It just seemed like they were really getting a charge out of being nasty about this person. So I'm not kidding. We're standing, in front of windows facing the driveway, and that person rolls up with their family and gets out of the car. And immediately the gaslighter, who has a lot of other challenges, it's like a light bulb went off, like a light switch. They enthusiastically, in front of me, greeted this person as if it was their favorite person in the world. Not only physically affectionately hugging them and hanging on to them, but honey, I love you so much. I've missed you. It's so great to see you. And I thought, holy Toledo, I'm standing here and I almost can't reconcile these things. But when you know what you're dealing with, it's much easier to make sense of a crazy making situation. And I use the term crazy making because it is. So it's just kind of a minor example. So what happens to you if you've had a lot of gaslighting, or even just gaslighting by one important person, right? And again, it doesn't have to be your parents. It very often is. And it very often is early. It could be a teacher or a coach or a clergy person. It could be somebody important in your life, right? That has some control over what you do and your idea of yourself as a person and your idea of your worth. So gaslighting leads you to distrust your feelings and perceptions. As I mentioned, you're like, what is going on? It must be me, right? Because we all want to be loved. And as kids, we all kind of want to get it right. But a gaslighting situation is one where you can't get it right. There's never a way for you to get it right. It becomes really hard as you get older, even, to spot people who will treat you poorly. And unconsciously, we all seek out things that are familiar and comfortable in the sense that they're familiar. So even though the people who come along in our lives, friends, partners, bosses, coworkers, you name it, look different on the outside, and they might express themselves differently, and they may have different other strengths and challenges, you're going to find some version of a toxic person, or a person who minimizes your feelings, oh, just get over it, or devalues you, you don't know what you're talking about, or denies your reality. That's not what happened. Stop making things up. When you're like, oh my God, I kind of wish I had this on film. And of course, now today you can. People who've been gaslit a whole bunch have a harder time making decisions because they don't trust themselves. And of course they don't. If your reality and your emotions and your reactions are denied from early on, or in a really significant way, of course you're like, I don't know, maybe I'm not a person who can make a decision about what restaurant we go to or what meal I'm going to have. And I'm not kidding. Even really simple things can feel overwhelming. So forget big decisions about what job to take, where to live, should I date this person, and so forth. It's going to be somebody who, whether or not they're intelligent or skilled and likable, will just have a hard time believing in themselves. And you might find that you struggle with things like anxiety and depression, completely normal. You might find that you take on blame for other people's stuff, even when you don't have to, because you've been trained to feel like the problem is always you. Right? My heart breaks as I'm talking about that, because I'm telling you right now, and if no one else tells you this today or this week or in general, I want you to know this. You were born with inherent worth. You matter. You should tell yourself that every day. Use affirmations that reaffirm your inner divinity, because it's there. And it's okay if right now you don't really feel that way. It takes time, but chances are you've been giving yourself messages like these kind of toxic affirmations because that's what you heard. But we give these messages to ourselves again and again, and it makes us feel awful. And it isn't true. And in another podcast, I'll talk about hypnotic trances and everyday trances and how they form and how we can change them. But for now, just know you have worth. You're important. And just because somebody treated you as if you weren't, doesn't mean you have to take that in. You can imagine a Teflon coating. Next time you encounter that, you can observe it and watch it bounce off. And again, I know it's not as easy as just doing that, but I'm just suggesting a mental device that can start shifting the way you take in that kind of gaslighting and toxicity, because you don't have to pull it so close. But yeah, you can feel like something's fundamentally wrong with you, and you may not even know what that is. You can find it so hard to trust people, right? Because the people who you were supposed to be able to trust, the people who were supposed to actually treat you well and take good care of you and help you develop into a healthy and self-confident person, did exactly the opposite. So, and they may have explicitly said, this is not uncommon at all. Well, you can't trust this one. You can't trust that one. You can't trust the other one, or I'm the only one you can come to, right? It's sick. And it's a sickness you can't heal. You can only work on you. I know I've said that so many times today, but I really want you to understand, let go of responsibility for taking care of people who will just do you harm. So what can you do? Let's get to that now. And there are things you can do. So a simple but very powerful thing you can do is to develop some sort of centering practice. Now, this might feel like it's been oversaid. I know everybody talks about mindfulness. Mindfulness is an incredibly helpful and important tool. The research shows that. I'm not just saying it. It can help you to feel calmer when there's chaos around you and when there's chaos brewing within you. Any sort of meditation practice can help you to create distance between your thoughts and feelings and your idea of yourself, right? Because so often we take in our feelings of distress as meaning something bad about us. So a centering practice can be yoga. It can be jogging. It can be prayer. It can be journaling. It can be affirmations. It can be creative writing. It can be playing or creating music, right? But a centering practice it's good emotional hygiene, and everybody should do it, but especially if you're dealing with a lot. A good centering practice helps you to think more clearly about what's going on and what you want to do. Furthermore, a good centering practice is going to help you deal with the distress that you feel when you start to cut off or distance yourself or change the parameters of a relationship with somebody who's super toxic, gaslighter or not, right? I'm going to tell you a quick side anecdote about that, and then I'm going to get back to the tips. But, if you think about the analogy of a 3-year-old who wants to sleep in your bed, and you feel like it's better for them to start sleeping on their own. When you first start setting that limit, even if it's in the most loving way possible, little Johnny or little Sally, you got to sleep in your own bed. You know, I'm going to read you a bedtime story, but, you know, this is going to be better for both of us. What that toddler is going to do, anybody who's had a toddler or ever met a toddler is going to know that at first that toddler is going to amp it up. They're going to throw more tantrums. They're going to cry more. They're going to say they need a glass of water 32 times the next few nights. Now, if you give in, they'll know that if they turn up the volume on that tactic, that nothing will ever change. You'll be like, forget it, I can't do this. Because it causes you distress, understandably. You know, and I'm not trying to badmouth toddlers. That's kind of where they are developmentally. But a toxic person that you're trying to even just, you know, narrow, you know, the amount of exposure you have to them, or change the relationship parameters, like, okay, so-and-so, if you're going to talk to me like that, I'm going to hang up now. I'm not going to come see you this week. Or, you know, you can say that, but I actually know what I just saw. So, you know, you go have a good day, but I'm not going to deal with that. Right. So sometimes you're going to change parameters by, you know, a complete cutoff, but there's a whole lot of space in between and you get to choose. And that's actually one of my other tips. You can tolerate their tantruming or they're trying to suck you back in, even better if you have a centering practice. Now, of course, you know, sometimes it's going to be something as simple as getting up and leaving a room, hanging up a phone, like I just mentioned, going out for walks, getting a hobby where you're with other people who have a fresher and clearer perspective on reality, so that the gaslighter is not your only world or the majority of it. I'm aware that some people can't just do that, and we'll talk about that in a second. You know, a good therapist is going to be really important. They're going to help you to find a way to be safe emotionally and physically and learn how to create distance. That's really, you know, the specifics for anybody's one situation, that's beyond the scope of this podcast. But finding a good licensed therapist near you in your network and so forth, or, you know, even in a low-cost clinic near you, but finding somebody who has professional expertise and can support you through a process and also help you get a clearer sense of how to trust your own reality, how to trust your perceptions. And that's a process. That's not overnight. Super important. You can go on psychologytoday.com and look for somebody near you. You can go to your state psychological board, find them online and do a search for providers there. Again, you can look for mental health clinics near you. You can, I know I'm jumping around a bit, keep a record. And this serves a few purposes. If somebody sends you abusive phone messages or texts or emails, keep a record of that. One, at minimum, that's going to be helpful when you are checking with people outside the situation and saying, you know, I think this is not okay, but I've learned to distrust my feelings. Can you help me? You know, how does this sound to you? People outside of that situation will probably be pretty honest. And again, a professional will be a place where you can safely and confidentially share that information to help you get a reality check and also decide what you want to do. If you are in a situation that is unsafe, I'm going to give you the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. I'm going to give you a number and I'm going to give you a text number. So the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799 and the word SAFE, SAFE. And that turns out to be 7233. So 800-799-7233. And if you don't know where to start and you're in a domestic violence situation, you're in a situation where you or your family members or your pets, even you feel like you're not safe, start there. You can also text them by texting the word START, like START, to 88788. Again, that's text START to 88788 to reach the National Domestic Violence Hotline. So all of this is to tell you that you don't have to solve the entire puzzle all by yourself, but you have to be the person who is on your own team, who is captaining your team. So let me know what you think of the podcast. Let me know if this is helpful. If you are looking for other resources, another centering option is to listen to guided imagery. I have, as many of you now know, a number of albums. It might be like 11 or 12 albums now available pretty exclusively through Hay House. And one that's really helpful is letting go of unhealthy relationships. I just want to clarify that you don't have to say, oh, I'm going to absolutely cut this person off 100%. You don't have to be there to do these exercises. Letting go of unhealthy relationships includes letting go of unhealthy relationships with yourself. It includes changing the parameters so you can change the rules of the relationship so you can feel happier, healthier, safer. So if you're interested, check it out. And again, I also have meditations for greater self-compassion, greater, healthier self-esteem, and one even for creating positive change. Because it's important sometimes to realize and remember that all change starts in the mind first, right? Before we ever take an action, it has to be something we can imagine and formulate in our mind in some way. And actually, mental rehearsal of any change, but especially big ones, can take some of the stress out of it. And you can use these things on your own or with your own counselor or therapist. But again, I hope this has been helpful. Please let me know what you think. And until next time, know that, of course, as always, I wish you all the very best. Be well.